but someone just told me I shouldn't do that. But I used to wash my feet everywhere I walked. And so one time when I was in junior high, we were going out to a assembly or something, and we're all walking in a line, and I'm walking on the blacktop, just fascinated, matching up the lines of the basketball court. And someone said something behind me, and I looked up, and right as I looked up, this pole came out of nowhere and hit me straight in the face. So I learned that I should probably watch where I'm going after that. I still do it every once in a while. But I also learned a couple years later that it's not just me that does that. A lot of times we have little quirks, we have little things that we focus on, and it sometimes makes us miss. We have blind spots for everything else around us. I completely didn't see that pole coming. And I also saw a commercial a while back that kind of pointed this out. So we got a clip of that. How many of you completely missed The Walking Bear? How many of you saw it? I heard some giggles. All right, good job. Some of you are very aware. Yeah, so I watched this video, and the first time I saw it, I didn't believe it. I had to go back, and I watched the video like 3 or 4 times before I believed that he was there the entire time. But it's true. The video is right. It's easy to miss stuff when you're focusing, right? You focus so hard on the white players, you completely miss this guy that's dressed in a bear suit that just walks right in the middle and moonwalks out. And I thought it was the funniest thing, but it's also something that's kind of obvious, right? When we focus on things, we have a tendency to block everything out, and so we develop these blind spots that we don't really see things clearly. But this isn't just my problem. It's not just was not the only person that walked in the poles. It's not just your guys' problems. You guys are not the only ones that missed the bear. It also happened like to the people in Jesus' time. Right? A series called "Am I Blind?" So talking about just the Jewish people that Jesus is talking to and all the things that they're missing. So tonight we're actually going to look at we're going to finish up chapter 8 and be looking at a group of Jews that completely missed what Jesus was trying to tell them, the truth that he was giving them, because they were focused on the wrong thing. So we're going to open up our Bibles to John chapter 8, verse 31. So it starts off and says, "So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, 'If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.'" So I think one very important thing that we have to remember here tonight is that Jesus is talking to a group of believers. I think a lot of times when we think of Jesus talking to people and getting up people cases and correcting them, it's always Jesus talking to the Pharisees or talking to the religious leaders or something. Tonight, Jesus is going to be talking to a group of Jews that have decided to believe him. We ended last week and it said many came to believe him. Jesus is talking to that group of people that decided to believe him. And so we have to keep in mind that these are not people that we can't relate to. These are not the Pharisees that knew everything, the lawyers. These are people like us who chose to believe in Jesus. So he talks about abiding in his word. So he tells them, okay, you've chosen to believe in me, but if you really want to follow me, a true disciple is going to abide in my word. The word used for abide talks about, the NASB uses the word kind of continue in. The NIV talks about kind of staying in one solid state. So it's this motion of just getting to a place and staying in there. And when Jesus talks about his word, he's referring to all the things that he's teaching them. He's referring to all the teachings that he's going to tell them. So verse 33 says, "They answered him, 'We are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it you say that we will become free?'" So before we get into their response to him, we have to kind of talk about the Jewish people themselves. So they have a history. If you've not read the Old Testament is all about the Jewish people, their relationship with God, and the history of their people. So they had the start of the nation of Israel is Abraham. Their forefather, the really start of everything is this guy named Abraham. So before that, we're going to talk about Abraham for a little bit. And we're going to go back all the way back to Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. So Abraham is this guy. He was born in around 2100 BC. So about 2,000 years before Jesus was even born. Okay, he grew up and he married this woman named Sarai. Unfortunately, she was barren. She couldn't have kids. But when he was 75 years old, God made a promise to him, saying, I will give you a son, and I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. Can you imagine your grandparents, now like someone your grandparents' age, 75 years old, doesn't have any kids, and God tells them you're going to have a son? Can you imagine how crazy that would sound?
Pretty crazy.
Okay, imagine how crazy this is. Fast forward 25 years later, and Abraham's 100, and then he has a kid. So Abraham has to wait for 100 years to have his son, to have this promise fulfilled by God. So he's got his first son. The promise has been fulfilled. He loves his son. He raises him up, and when Isaac, his son, is about 15 to 25, somewhere in that age range, God talks to Abraham again and asks him to sacrifice his son. This son that Abraham waited 100 years for. And just comparatively to his life, a few years later, God asked him to give him up. And how does Abraham react? Well, the very next day, he gets up and he takes his son, and they go to the place where God has told him to sacrifice. And he gets to the point where he sets up the altar, he lays his son down, and right as he lifts the knife up to kill his son, the angel of the Lord comes down and tells him to stop. And he provides a sacrifice for the altar and tells Abraham he will be rewarded because of his faith. So that's where we're going to see this promise that is really the beginning of the Jewish people's answer. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 15, and an angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. And I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So this promise that God makes Abraham, blessing his offspring and blessing his descendants, this is what the Jewish people hold on to for 2,000 years. They've just held on to this promise. God said he will bless us. We will be blessed. We are descendants of Abraham. So that's what we really need to see that tonight, because that is where their focus has been. Their focus has been, all right, we are the people of God. God promised us this. He promised us this. These blessings, all these good things that would happen. So we're set. We've got this good. And that's where their focus has been on tonight, and that's left them with a couple blind spots. Let's go back to John chapter 8, verse 34. Or verse 33. It says, So they answered him, We are offspring of Abraham. We have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? So they don't understand, right? They have God gave this promise to Abraham, and he said, I will bless you and I will bless your offsprings, and they will overcome the gates of their enemies. So he promised all these good things, so the Jewish people are just having a hard time understanding, what do you mean we've been enslaved? We only serve God, and he promised that he would bless us. Well, Jesus explains in verse 34. See, he answers them. He says, Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The Jews were so focused on the inheritance of the blessings that they had from their father, they completely were blind to the fact that they were enslaving themselves to sin. That they had this spiritual slavery that had happened because of their actions. 1 John 3:8 talks about it and says, Whoever makes a practice of sinning is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning. No one born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him, and he cannot keep sinning because he has been born of God. So Jesus tells them that the true heirs of this promise that was made to Abraham are not people who fulfill a bloodline requirement, who are physically descended from Abraham. The true heirs are people who abide in his word, who keep with him. He tells them and tells us that we're not actually heirs, whether we're physically a Jew or we thought we grew up in the church. We don't physically inherit that. if you sin, if you practice sin, you are a slave. But then Jesus goes one step further than that. He tells them the role that the slave plays in the house. He says the slave does not remain in the house forever, but the son remains forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. He tells them, unfortunately, you are not the sons that you thought you were, but I am, and I have the power to free you from the slavery that you put yourselves in. He continues in verse 37. He says, I know that you are offspring of Abraham. He will give them that. He will say, all right, I know that you physically have descended from Abraham. But then he tells them, yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen in my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. Jesus points to the inheritance, and he shows them, he said, all right, you say that Abraham is your father. Well, your actions put you here. You don't measure up to the bar that you set for yourself. Jesus tells them that they don't measure up to the bar that they set for themselves, but from their actions, from the way that they live their lives, he can see where they measure up. He can see who they really belong to. I found this short story online. It was really kind of interesting to me. It talks about if Christianity was illegal. And talked about this story of if Christianity was illegal and you were dragged into court. I'd just like to read it for you guys right now. In a world where following Christ is decreed to be a subversive and illegal activity, you have been accused of being a believer, arrested and dragged before a court. You've been under clandestine surveillance for some time now, and so the prosecution has been able to build up quite a case against you. They begin the trial by offering the judge dozens of photographs showing you attending church meetings and speaking at religious events, and participating in various prayer and worship services. After this, they present a selection of items that have been confiscated from your home. Religious books that you own, worship CDs, and other Christian artifacts. Then they step up the pace by displaying many of your poems, pieces of prose, a journal entry that you had lovingly written concerning your faith. Finally, in conclusion, the prosecution offers your Bible to the judge. It's a well-worn book with scribbles, notes, drawings, underlinings all throughout it. If it were needed, that you had read and reread the sacred text many times. Throughout the case, you've been sitting silently in fear and trembling. You know deep in your heart that the large body of evidence that has been amassed by the prosecution, you face the possibility of long imprisonment and even execution. At various times throughout the proceedings, you have lost all confidence and been on the verge of standing up and denying Christ. But while this thought has plagued your mind throughout the trial, you resisted the temptation and remain focused. Once the prosecution is finished presenting their case, the judge proceeds to ask if you have anything to add. But you remain silent, resolute, terrified that if you open your mouth, even for a moment, you might deny the charges made against you. Like Christ, you remain silent before your accusers. In response, you are let out and to wait the judge and ponder your case. The hours pass slowly as you sit under guard in the foyer, waiting to be summoned back. Eventually, a young man in a suit appears and leads you into the courtroom so that you may hear the verdict that would receive the word for your punishment. Once you're seated in the dock, the judge, a harsh and unyielding man, enters the room and stands before you and looks deep into your eyes and begins to speak. Of the charges that have been brought forward, I find the accused not guilty. Not guilty! Your heart freezes, and in a split second, the fear and terror that had moments before threatened to strip your resolve away are swallowed up by confusion and rage. Despite the surroundings, you stand defiantly before the judge and demand that he give an account concerning why you were innocent in the charges in light of the evidence. What evidence? He replies in shock. What about the poems and prose that I wrote? You yell. They simply show that you think yourself a poet, nothing more. But what about the services I spoke at, the times I wept in church, and the long sleepless nights in worship? Evidence that you're a good speaker, an actor, nothing more. It is obvious that you deluded those around you, and perhaps at many times even yourself. But this foolishness is not enough to convict you in a court of law. You yell at him, but this is madness. Obviously, there's no evidence that would make you convict somebody. And he just looks at you and says, "That's not so." As if informing you of a great, long-forgotten secret. The court is indifferent towards your Bible reading and church attendance. It has no concern for worship with words and a pen. Continue to develop your theology and use it to paint pictures of love. We have no interest in such armchair artists who spend their time creating images of a better world. We exist only for those who would lay down their brush and their life in a Christ-like endeavor to create a better world. So until you challenge the system and become a thorn in our side, until you die to yourself and offer your body to the flame, until then, my friend, you are no enemy of ours. One of the reasons why the Jews are going to have such a hard time with this is because Jesus is telling them that he's found them not guilty of being heirs of Abraham. Would we be found not guilty? Is there enough evidence in your life to condemn you of being a Christian? If tomorrow a law was passed that said Christianity is illegal and all Christians were dragged into the court like that, would there be enough evidence in your life to prove that you're a Christian? So Jesus has found the Jews not guilty of that. But they continue to insist that they are. In verse 39, they answered him, "Abraham is our father." Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works that Abraham did. So the Jews are still insisting that they are children of Abraham. But Jesus tells them what a true child looks like. He says a true child reflects his father. A true child imitates his father. You're not imitating Abraham. Romans 9 even goes so far as to say, "But it is not through the word, though the word of God has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as offspring." The children of God are not those who have passed down the bloodline. The children of God are those who bear fruit to show as evidence of their inheritance. Like the Jews, we have to stop being blind to the fact that we can't inherit salvation. The fact that there is no get out of jail free card. There is no pass go. There's no cheat to get to salvation. The only way to get there is through bearing fruit through your life. So Jesus continues in verse 40. "But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You are doing the works your father did." They said to him, "We were not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, even God." Their response of being born of sexual immorality shows their blindness to who Jesus is. If you are focused on Jesus, you will see Jesus for who he truly is, as the Messiah. Therefore, being born of a virgin makes sense. You see the prophecy, you see it lines up. If you are blind to that fact, and that fact cannot possibly be, then it makes sense that they would doubt where he came from. They're insulting. They're saying, "You can challenge who we are, but we know that you have these sketchy situations around where you were born." So they try and personally attack Jesus in some kind of defense to even throw it out there. And not only do they personally attack Jesus, but they change their tactics. They go, "All right, well, maybe you won't give us Abraham, but we're descendants of God. We're the chosen people of God. You can't deny that. We're Israel. God chose us." But Jesus responds in verse 42. He tells them, "If God were your father, you would love me. For I come from God, and I am here. I come not of my own accord, but he sent me." Again, Jesus tells the Jews, you're putting the bar up here, but you're down here. You still don't meet the standards. John takes it a step further in 1 John 5. It says, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. See, John understands that if you love God, you not only love Jesus, but you also love everyone else that is born of God. And if you're a Christian, you are born of God. You inherit that right. Are we not right in saying that you are Samaritan and have a demon? Again, they just don't get it. They keep missing the point and going straight to, oh, yeah, we know, I mean, if you think we're not Jews, that means you must have some different theology, and that means you're probably a Samaritan, so you're probably not with God either. They go straight to this point and try and attack him personally. But Jesus isn't even fazed. The second part of their thing makes complete sense. When they say you have a demon, it makes sense. If you are blind to the truth that Jesus has, and he's not the Messiah to you, he has to be crazy. There's no other option. I know a lot of people, I've heard some people that are like, oh yeah, just Jesus is a good moral teacher, or he's fun and has a lot of good points in the Bible. No, there's two options with God. Either you see Jesus and you say he's the Messiah, or you see him and say he's nuts. And that's what they point to. They say, you have a demon, because that is messed up stuff that you're saying. We don't know where it's coming from. But Jesus answers them. He says, I don't have a demon. He says, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Part of that demon accusation is that they're accusing him of putting himself up here, of saying that he is the son of Abraham. He meets the requirements. He's making much of himself. But Jesus emphasizes, he says, I'm not making much of myself. I don't seek my own glory. But he is giving glory. Because there is one who seeks glory from Jesus. He's the judge. He's God. Jesus continues in 51. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps your word, they will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets who died? Who do you make yourself out to be? They kind of have this moment like, all right, now we know for sure that you're crazy, because we're looking at Abraham, who kept the word of God, who got this blessing for us as the people of God, the prophets who kept the word of God, and yet they all died. They're all gone. But you say that if someone keeps your word, they won't die? Who are you? They ask him again about who he's making himself out to be, where he's setting his glory at. But Jesus answers them again with the same answer. He says, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. This claim is like one of the biggest things that Jesus said so far. I mean, besides the fact that he's called them children of the devil. But he tells them just flat out, look, the one who seeks glory from me, you call him God. He's my Father. Deal with it. If there was ever a time to drop the mic in the Bible, that'd be it. That's where it's at. He continues, but you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Jesus talks once again. He says, I'm not making much of myself. God makes much of me. I don't have to do the work. He's told them this like over and over and over again. If you don't remember, in verse 38, he says, I speak of what I have seen with my Father. It's not me. Verse 42, he says, I came not of my own accord, but he sent me. And even in verse 50, yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it. He is the judge. Jesus constantly is telling them, look, I'm not looking after my own glory. God does that. I don't have to worry about that. But because of their focus on their heritage as the people of God, they're completely blind to the truth that he's telling them. It doesn't even occur to them that he could be telling the truth. See, the truth is, there's areas that we are blind in because we focus on the wrong things. We focus on expanding our knowledge of God, on loving people rather than reaching out to them. The place where we need to focus is we need to focus on Jesus. We need to focus on him, on abiding in his word. And if we do that, then we won't have to worry about the blind spots. But Jesus doesn't let them off the hook. He doesn't kind of drop the fact of this thing they've been arguing about fathers. He brings it back to Abraham and he says, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. It says, you said to him, you're not yet 50 years old. Have you seen Abraham? Okay, we talked about this. When did Abraham live? Anyone? Just 2,000 years before Jesus was even born, right? So if he was 50, he still wouldn't have seen Abraham. So the point is not like, oh yeah, if you've been here like just 1 year more, you would have got it. The point that they're trying to make is it's another personal attack. Because 50 is the age of their elders. 50 is the age where you retire. 50 is the age where you are wise, you have experience. They will listen to what you say. What they're telling Jesus is, you're young and dumb. What do you know? Why would we listen to you? You're not even an elder yet. You're 30-something years old. Doesn't know what he's talking about. But how does Jesus respond? Jesus says to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Okay, I lied before. This would be the time to drop the mic. That would be it. If you don't understand this goes all the way back to Exodus, the second book of the Bible. Exodus 3:14, and God's talking to Moses, and it says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent you. Jesus is no longer claiming that God is his Father. Jesus is now claiming, I am God. If he was talking about living forever, he would have used the past tense. He would have said, I was. He's claiming the name of God, which they never use. And they have the right reaction. See, we need to abide in Jesus' word, because if we become blind to who he is, we will have the same reaction to him that they had. Verse 59 says, so they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. They picked up stones to kill him. This was not like, oh yeah, let's see if he's hurt. This was like, this was an order from the Old Testament Levitical law that if anyone blasphemes the name of God, you're to kill them with stones. The entire city is in on it. Everyone's supposed to participate because that is a serious offense. The difference being the way it was ordered they were supposed to have a trial first. But they were so caught up they were so blind to who Jesus actually was that their emotions got the best of them and they just went right for it. But the scary thing is not the reaction to what Jesus says. The scary thing is Jesus' reaction. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. John has this theme of Jesus kind of appearing and disappearing in and out of places. And a lot of times he'll end it with the phrase, "It was not yet his time." Because John was very adamant about there was a time and place for Jesus to suffer. And it was not going to happen before then. The words that are used for Jesus hid himself are actually more passive in the Greek. And so what you hear is more of God hid Jesus. There's a quote from Augustine that says, "As man, Jesus flees from the stones, but woe to those whose heart of stone God flees." Because if you don't focus on God, if your focus is not in the right place, you will become blind to what Jesus is doing, to what God is doing. And that's the result. God's not going to force himself on you. God created free will for a reason. He gives you the opportunity to believe in him or not believe in him. But if you become blind to the things that he's doing, it might get to the situation where you force his hand. We have these blind spots, and we need to be aware of them. We need to not just be aware of them, but we need to change our focus from whatever we're focusing on now to focus on Jesus. Because if we focus on Jesus, on his teachings, on all his teachings, then and only then will the blind spots be around. I'm going to invite the band to come up as we finish in prayer.